Hello, I'm here with Shriti, the chair of Prudential, and it's been a pleasure working with her for the past month. It was been quite intense work.
Yes.
And as you know, the private sector investment lab was put in place and was including leaders of the financial industry, leaders from the capital market, and it was chaired by Mark Cartney and Shriti. And Shriti is here to tell us a little bit how this experience went through these last few months.
It's been fun, no, Maktar?
It was
Has been
exciting.
Fun? Yes, it's been exciting. So I guess from the private sector's perspective, there's a lot of expectations on how much the private sector will provide funding for whether that's climate or development needs. And that is a little alarming because, in the absence of a carbon price, in the absence of other incentives, it's very difficult for the private sector to do this. So the idea was that the World Bank should use its own lending and its own activities in emerging markets to try and leverage, for every dollar they lend, more private sector capital, because that is what is needed in the world today. And we started with what we thought was the easiest, which was guarantees, correct? And I'm very excited by the result from the work that Maktar, you and Hiroshi and others have been doing around the creation of this single guarantee platform that the private sector can use, which provides scale and ease of use, ease of access, but also enables the private sector to understand what is available. Because if we don't know what's available, we won't structure our projects or our own financing to use this. So we need to understand ex ante what it is that will be available to us. And we hope this platform, which will be launched on the 1st of July, will be the first product of the work that you've all been doing.
But you've been very modest, really. You talk about one thing that we did, but you did many other things. You talked about FX, you
Yes.
talked about origination, you
Yes.
talked about syndication, you talked about lots of
Securitization.
things. Yeah.
I mean, we've divided into several work streams. They include how do we securitize, originate to distribute, not just because that will release capital for the World Bank Group to lend more, but more importantly because it could create a new asset class. It could create a market, a capital market in which private sector institutions that have large pools of capital who do not currently significantly invest in these markets can invest, because they need liquid tradable products. But to create liquid tradable products, you need a lot of scale. So what we're talking about is how do you scale up a securitization model using the work that the IFC is doing, originating, that's 1 or 2 billion, but how do we get to tens of billions? That creates liquidity and tradability. And we have to work with other multilateral organizations. We have to work with the IBRD. We have to work with private sector originators and try and create an asset class that people in the private sector will invest in, and therefore provide the level of funding that is needed, the scale of the funding that is needed. That's one big area. The other one is, of course, FX. It's always very problematic. It's very hard to crack, but it does prevent FX risk long-term, beyond 5 or 10 years. If you're looking at a 20-year, 30-year project, the foreign exchange risk of investing in local currency is very difficult for foreign investors to invest cross-border. So we've talked about domestic mobilization, domestic local currency mobilization, but also finding different ways of layering the risk so that we can get governments themselves to support FX risk, and that would create another very high degree of mobilization of the private sector if we could manage that.
Shriti, let me talk about something, and we're going to end our conversation very soon. Let me tell you something that you was a member of government. You worked in the public service.
I was.
And
a long time ago.
A long time ago. Yeah, we understand each other.
Yes.
It was a long time ago, but what's interesting is that you have now here working on the private sector. Mark had this journey which was not identical, was similar. And I think that the conversation was very much enriched by that experience. I do think that if you had not someone who worked in government, understand institution building and the constraints, it would have been difficult for you to connect that with the private sector investment.
Yes.
And I think the thinking over the last 25 to 30 years in the development world and emerging market has evolved more and more from government solutions to private sector solutions. Tell us 2-3 minutes about that journey. What do you take, looking back a little bit about how things are evolved, how the consensus has changed in the world about the role of the private sector in helping emerging economies to grow?
Yes, you know, when I started work in 1984, there was nothing called emerging markets. They were called, you know, developing countries, low income. It was not the concept of emerging, and how their role in the global economy has changed is so dramatic and so radical. So now if you're in the private sector, you really can't operate without really operating in some shape or form, whether you're in finance or in manufacturing, it doesn't matter. We're completely integrated, so the private sector has to be involved. But I think there's another change that is slightly different from the one you're talking about, Maktar, which is that also there is a greater recognition of global public goods, whether that is of climate or health, where instead of just having a private sector solution or just a public sector solution, there needs to be a more blended approach to both of them. They have to sort of work together. And it is not possible for the private sector on its own to provide, you know, in sort of some self-combusting way to end up providing an externality, a global public good, without the incentive structures and the support of public institutions like the World Bank. And the World Bank is the big beast in this area, right? You're the biggest, most impactful organization that can really support how the work that is being done. So I think it's swung from, it all used to be public to private, and now it's more blended, shall I say.
Exactly. No, we saw COP21 and we are seeing COP30.
Exactly, very different.
Both of us work in government,
yes,
mostly private sector, but I think that this is the way is becoming more and more a blended place,
yes,
where you don't have a unique a silver bullet to address all issues.
Exactly.
So Shriti, it has been wonderful working with you.
Lovely.
And I know that you continue working together.
Yes.
Say a few words about what are the perspective for the private sector lab.
Of the lab?
Yeah.
Well, we have created a lot of work streams that we're going to leave Maktar and Hiroshi and other people to work with, and we're going to come back in the during the UNGA week and meet again to see what progress has been made on the guarantee platform, on foreign exchange, on junior capital. And for me, the big prize is securitization and creating our capital markets for emerging markets, particularly around climate and other forms of infrastructure financing, getting the big guys to play in this area. And those are the 4 or 5 big areas. And I really also hope that there will be a way in which the World Bank can go out and explain to the private sector what is available, what it does, because it does this extraordinary work, but so many people in the private sector don't actually know it or understand it, or know that this is available to them if they kind of make the approach. So I'm also keen for you guys to market yourselves. So I hope that'll happen too. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. It's a lot of work. And it was fun working with you and continue working with you.
We will continue. It's not finished yet.
Thanks so much. Bye.